Thank you for showing up and listening to little old me. I think Pastor called me an expert, and I'm not sure that's a compliment, because the word expert comes from two Latin words, simpler words, ex and spurt. And an ex is an unknown quantity, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. So don't call me an expert. But I read a lot of stuff, and as a result, I am just full of it. And so I'm going to be talking to you conversationally tonight about our nation and the godliness of the United States of America, and how our founding fathers did the best job they could to make a government, a brand new government out of nothing, that was as godly and as just as they could possibly make. They were really the real thing. Now, if you like what I have to say tonight, and maybe even if you don't like what I have to say tonight, but it piques your interest and you want to look someplace else, this is the Founder's Bible, which comes from Wall Builders. And Wall Builders is an organization that was headed up and still is headed up by David Barton and his son, Tim. Okay? So David Barton is a phenomenal speaker. If you ever have a chance to listen to him, do so. You can go home and go to your search engine on your computer and type in David Barton and Wall Builders, and you will find a wealth of information. Now, one of the things I appreciate about David Barton and his organization is that they own one of the most extensive collections of original material from the founding era. If you want to understand the mindset, the motivation, the direction, that somebody like George Washington had, read what he wrote. Don't read a book about George Washington and somebody's opinion about him. Read his letters, read his speeches, read his personal correspondence. Go to direct sources like this. Benjamin Franklin, what a guy. If I got to go back in time, I don't know if I would rather spend the afternoon with Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin. I think I would choose Benjamin Franklin because he just would be more fun to be around. So, you want to find out about him? Read what he wrote directly. What did he say directly? Thomas Jefferson, what did he say directly? Go to direct sources. So David Barton, and about a third of this Bible are stories that are about the founding era and our founding fathers. There are about 200 men that qualify as being founding fathers. And this is really just outstanding. Outstanding. The other very important source is Rabbi Daniel Lapin, Lapin, and he is an Orthodox Jewish rabbi. But this guy is not just educated. He's not just well-read. He's not just articulate. He is wise. He is very wise. So if you have a chance, once again, to do a search for Rabbi Daniel Lapin, he starts out every one of his podcasts. See, he's from South Africa, and so whenever he has to fill out a form that asks, he likes to fill out that he's an African American, which he is. And the people look at that and go, but you're not an African American. He says, I was born in South Africa, and now I'm a naturalized citizen. I'm an African American. He said, but you're not black. It doesn't say if you're black. So he likes to jerk people around a little bit, which I admire very greatly. But Daniel Lapin has said something very profound about the United States, which he loves. It's his adopted country, and he loves us, okay? He said that there are many cultures in the world, but one civilization. And the United States of America is the pinnacle of world civilization, not just culture. He said, you know, there are lots of people that would like you to believe that all cultures are equally valuable. They may be different. They may have ideas and values that we don't agree with or that we can't understand, but that they're all basically good. That's hogwash, okay? Or as he would say, unadulterated bilge water, okay? That's about as rough as his speech ever gets. So there are many, many cultures. There are as many different cultures pretty much as there are people on earth. But there's one civilization. And he says, if you don't believe that the United States represents true civilization, just look at the people that are voting with their feet, that are literally risking life and limb to get here to America. He says, how many people are trying to get into North Korea? How many people are trying to get into, so many of these other despotic countries? They're trying to get to America. So whether people want to admit it or not, okay, we've got it. We really do. And it's not just because I'm biased. I am biased, but I have earned this bias through my study and through my contemplation and by trying to follow the ideas of really, really smart guys and women. Here's my political leaning. I am dead center. I try to make all my decisions based on being centered under the plumb bob of heaven. Now, if you're an architect, if you're a builder, you know what a plumb bob is. It's a weight on a string that you use to tell when one part of the building is directly underneath another part of the building. The plumb bob of heaven is the Bible. It really is. The plumb bob of heaven is the Bible. It is the operating manual that has been provided to us by the Creator of the universe. And He should know. Now, there are so many people today that would say, it's just a fairy tale. It can't possibly be true. I used to tend to agree with that until I came to the true realization of the historical fact of the resurrection of Jesus. There is no reasonable way that you can look at the resurrection of Jesus and say it never happened. First of all, I ask you a simple question. The disciples made a complete 180-degree turn. They went from being sad, dejected, desperate, and fearful for their lives to going out and changing the world by spreading the gospel. Something happened to them to change them around completely. I believe it was the resurrection of Jesus Christ. They saw Him crucified. They saw Him put in a tomb. And then in 3 days, they saw Him alive, walking around in good health, looking good, How could you have fooled them? That's the question. How could you have fooled the disciples into believing that Jesus wasn't crucified, wasn't dead, wasn't buried, wasn't resurrected? How could you fool them? Now, I grew up with Mission Impossible, where you watch it, you buy into the storyline, and at the very end, somebody rips off this latex mask, and you go, oh, now I figured it out. Oh, wow, I was fooled by that. How could you, by any reasonable stretch of the imagination, have fooled the disciples? I don't believe it would be possible. I don't believe it would be possible. Furthermore, just as an objective fact, Jesus and his life fulfilled dozens of Old Testament prophecies. Dozens. The odds against one man fulfilling all the prophecies in the Old Testament are the same as the odds of covering the entire state of Texas with silver dollars to a depth of 2 feet and marking one of these silver dollars and putting it someplace out in the state of Texas with all of its counties and all of its hills and all of its valleys, the state of Texas, covered to a depth of 2 feet in silver dollars. And now you have to blindfolded go out and pick up the one silver dollar that has been painted. The odds of that are just, they're past astronomical. Okay? Now, if Jesus is what he said he was, now this is just in defense of the Bible. If Jesus is who he said he was, as evidenced by the fact that he was raised from the dead, he believed in the Old Testament. Every time that Jesus said, "It is written," that was the Old Testament. Therefore, if he's the Son of God, see, this is direct line thinking. He's raised from the dead. He is the Son of God. He couldn't have made a mistake. He believed that the Old Testament was completely true and inspired. Therefore, the Old Testament is true. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are stories about him written by people who were there. Okay? So I have a tendency to look at the Bible and say, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Heavenly Father, that you love us so much that you would give us a plumb bob. And I'm trying to be right underneath the center of that plumb bob. You know who else was trying to be under the center of that plumb bob? The Founding Fathers. And before them, the Pilgrims. So all of my opinions are informed by the Bible to the best of my ability. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. Now, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States were written by men. Therefore, they are not perfect. They are not inspired. But they're knocking on the door. They are great. I consider the Declaration of Independence and the Gettysburg Address to be possibly the two greatest things that were written by people that didn't claim to get the information from God. Now, it didn't start with the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence grew out of a groundswell of the 13 colonies and the individual people that made up those colonies. You talk about a grassroots movement, okay? If you go all the way back to the Mayflower, that was a terrible journey across the Atlantic. Terrible. It took 3 times longer than normal. The conditions were awful. When they got here, they were blown off course. They were supposed to go to the Jamestown colony in Virginia, what is now Virginia. And they wound up in a godforsaken place that was completely untamed except for the Native Americans that were living there. Okay? And these people were, for the most part, they weren't architects. They were not farmers. They were city folks. Okay? And when they got to the New World, when they got to Plymouth, the first thing they did before they ever set foot on dry land was, we need to decide how we're going to live. And so they came up with the Mayflower Compact. Mayflower Compact points out this is going to be the basis of law and order for our colony, because we're on our own. The Mayflower Compact is remarkable because up until that time, in everybody's mind, the order of authority had always been God, and then the king and his government, and then the people. They just have to take it on the chin. Okay? The Mayflower Compact said, no, the ultimate authority is God as revealed in the Bible, and then the people are sovereign. The people provide for themselves. The people control themselves. And then, growing out of the people to serve the people is government. Government, well, from the very beginning, was the servant of the people in America and not the master. Now, that itself, I could say, thanks very much and let's all go home. And that would be enough. But I don't have an opportunity very often to vent my spleen and talk about how great America is, so I'm not done. So, if you go forward in time to 1776, the Declaration of Independence, okay, which is a wonderful, wonderful document, and it's so short. It could have been written in English that nobody could understand if you weren't a lawyer, but it was written in plain language. And the Declaration of Independence, basically, it was the 13 colonies saying, we've done everything we can, and in the words of Popeye the Sailor Man, that's all I can stand, I can't stand no more. And so we are of a right and ought to be free and independent of England and King George III. Okay? Now, the Declaration of Independence was written mainly by Thomas Jefferson, although he was just one man on a committee. But everybody looked at Thomas Jefferson and said, you are the one that is the best with words. Now, it took him like 2 weeks to come up with this. Do you think he started from zero and went and found books and researched? No. This was from the abundance of his heart. This was a time cusp for Thomas Jefferson. He had spent his entire life, although he didn't know it, preparing for this moment. And this is the fruit of it. So, and I might mention, you can't separate the Declaration of Independence from the Bible. 4 separate times in this short document do they refer to God. 4 times. Okay? The idea of the Bible and being central was very important to them. Now, modern day politics would like to divide us all into groups. You're a man. You're not a woman. Okay? You're a transgender. You're straight. You're homosexual. You're not. You're white. You're black. You're Native Samoan. You're this, you're that, and we're going to talk to you as though you're a group, and somehow they feel like if they can put a label on you, then they know everything about you that they need to know, and they got it. Don't do that. Okay? We are all unique, complete individuals, that's a God thing. That's a God thing. Okay? He always deals with people individually. Your salvation is an individual thing. Okay? Going to church or you're having your mom and dad being Christians doesn't make you a Christian any more than sitting in a garage makes you a car. Okay? No, that's an old, my Taekwondo instructor used to say, if you have a dog that sleeps in the corner of the dojo and watches everybody practice, says after a while, the dog feels like it knows Taekwondo. Now that's really insulting, but anyway, there it is. Same idea. Think about communism and how far away it is from the Plumb Bob of the universe. Think about socialism. Think about secular progressivism. Think about evolution. Think about fascism. Okay? How far away these are. So just think in terms of, I'm going to try to follow the Bible. And I love the Declaration of Independence and I love the Constitution. Because this is by far the best that has ever been. This is civilization. Okay? Instead of saying, well, I'm to the right, or I'm to the left, or I'm socialistic, no. I'd like to refer to those folks as they're not under the spotlight, they're out in the darkness, and some of them are really out there. Communism is really out there. Okay? So they're AFC, away from center. Okay? So don't worry about left, right. Just think of we're in the center. We're trying to be in the center. Not perfect, because it's a human institution, but the best. Okay. So here's the Declaration of Independence. This is profound. This is the second paragraph in the Declaration of Independence, and Angie promised me that she would put part of this up on the Bible in the sky. We hold these truths to be self-evident. The fact that so many people don't agree, I'm not sure it is self-evident, but to them, they were very well read, very well educated, much better than the average American today. These guys were way up there. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, meaning some people are not destined to be kings and other people are destined to be serfs. The idea of equality is really not emphasized very much in these founding documents. Liberty? Yes. Responsibility? Yes. Okay. But equality? No. They knew, like Jesus knew, some people are going to be wealthy, some people aren't. It's always going to be that way. Okay. One of the problems with the French Revolution is that they believed in égalité, fraternité, liberté. Liberty, freedom, and equality. Now, to make everybody equal, you can bring up the unwashed masses, or you can just cut off the heads of the nobility. Guess which one is easier? That was not the objective of the American Revolution. Okay. The objective of the American Revolution was summed up in the last 6 words of our Pledge of Allegiance: with liberty and justice for all. Okay? Equality under the law is what they're talking about here. Okay? Not a caste system. That all men are created equal. that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Now, a right is a gift given to you by virtue of the fact that you are a human being, and it is given by God. This was a revolutionary idea. They are unalienable rights. That means you cannot kill another person without just cause, because you would be alienating them from their God-given right to life. You can't kill yourself under this doctrine, because you would be alienating yourself from this God-given right to life. Okay? These are big thoughts. Okay? That among these are life, liberty. Liberty, once again, you can't legally sell yourself into slavery. It's an unalienable right. Surprise, surprise. Now, can you see the seed of destruction for the institution of slavery in this document? I can. To me, it's obvious. Now, it took several generations, and it took the sacrifice of 600,000 Americans fighting the Civil War to finally put an end to slavery in the United States, but we killed it. We're not there anymore. Just saying my say. Oh, and I also might point out that all these people that are indignant about slavery in the history of the United States, they would have to condemn every nation in the world. Slavery was the common denominator in all cultures worldwide, including Native Americans. Slavery was just a built-in, integral part of almost every culture. Okay? And yet, we were able to kill it. But do you know that there are more slaves on earth today than at any time in the history of the world? Where's the righteous indignation over that? All right, I'm just saying that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty. We got to liberty. Liberty is a precious, precious thing. But liberty is a coin, a precious coin. All coins have two sides. One side of the coin of liberty is freedom, but the other side, just as important, is self-control and responsibility. You can't have one without the other. Now, just think, you didn't have to pay anything to hear this. This is life-changing stuff. People love to talk about freedom, but when you talk about responsibility, they're not so hot on that. To have true freedom, you have to have the self-control to respect the freedom of everybody else, to not infringe on their freedom, and to be responsible for what you do, and to be responsible for what you don't do. If you don't work, if you don't apply yourself, you're going to wind up being middle-aged with pockets full of nothing. Founding fathers knew this. They didn't like it, but remember, Jesus said, the poor are going to be with you always. There used to be a radio commentator by the name of Neil Bortz. He's retired now. But I used to like to listen to Neil Bortz. I would go out of my way to listen to the radio when he was on it. And he did not like the 4th of July because he says, yes, they're Americans and they're waving their little flags and they're firing off their skyrockets and they're celebrating freedom and it's just wonderful and it's terrific to be an American. But he said, but they haven't taken responsibility for their own lives. Are they paying for their own retirement? Are they paying for their own health care? Are they paying for the roof over their heads? Are they paying for the food that goes into their bellies? Well, no, somebody else is providing them. They're slaves that don't work anymore. Now, it's about now that we're probably going to lose our internet feed. But that's okay. You guys are here, and this is being recorded, so it's going to be out there forever. I only got 3 words to say about that. Mwahaha. All right. So we believe that people are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, that two-sided coin. You have that from God. Nobody can take it away from you. Oh, and by the way, here's a universal principle that is shown right there in the concept of liberty, and that is the universal law of sowing and reaping. That is a big one. It is all through the Bible. You're an individual. You're free to do or not to do, but you're going to reap what you sow. And if you sow nothing, you're going to have nothing. And if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to keep getting what you've always gotten. So if it isn't working, you need to change something. The Bible is really into industry and frugality and investment in the future, being responsible for what you do, for what you say. And we're going to invest in the future. We're going to make an inheritance for our children. Okay? All through the Bible. So liberty, the idea of freedom, that's the action part. But responsibility, that's the reaction part. A physicist would call it cause and effect. But we know it as sowing and reaping. You cannot escape the law of sowing and reaping. Okay? All right. So, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Go, the pursuit of happiness? What? That sounds kind of trivial. In the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, it wasn't the pursuit of happiness, it was property. And the Bible is full of the idea of property. Okay? What is property? Property is something that you own. You have complete disposal of its use or disuse, who you give it to, how long you keep it, what you sell it for. That's the idea of property. Okay? Can you be happy without property? No. Okay? It's not a coincidence that communism attacks the idea of personal property. That's not a mistake. They say, you shouldn't really own your home. You shouldn't really own that money. You shouldn't own anything. It should belong to everybody in common. All right. Remember the Mayflower Pact? This was a colony that had been financed by wealthy people in England. They had obligations to the people that financed them. One of the obligations was they would live communally. They would have common food, common clothing, common possessions, common work. The land belongs to everybody. And they almost starved under this socialism because their productivity dropped off to almost nothing. Because able-bodied men said, why should we work so hard in the field when these other people out here are not working as hard? Can you imagine being a wife and you're doing your father's laundry or your husband's laundry? Yes, women came along. Okay? Unlike the Jamestown colony that were just men, and they almost died for the simple reason that they didn't have any women to tell them what to do. That's a little early American humor. So you're doing your husband's laundry and your children's laundry, and some other man from the colony comes up and says, "Wash my clothes too." And you go, "Excuse me?" He says, "Well, you have to. We're all in this together." Okay? So you have the ability to wash clothing. I have the need of dirty clothes. Get to it. Okay? Communism operates on need. To each according to his need, and from each according to his ability. Oh, that sounds so wonderful. That is awful. Okay? The Plumb bob of the universe operates on merit. What you do, or what you fail to do, what you refrain from doing. Okay? So the idea of property was, from the very beginning, John Locke, who was a British political philosopher, had lots of ideas about personal property and how important it is. Okay? So, you have a God-given right to the product of your labor. How about that? Now, the next part of this is just amazing. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That's the only right and proper function of government, to protect your God-given rights. Because not everybody is going to respect your right to life. There are murderers. Not everybody is going to respect your right to liberty. There are slavers. And not everybody is going to respect your right to personal property. There are robbers. Okay? So we bind ourselves together and make a government that can use force to force bad people to respect your rights. What an idea. Government is about force. The police, force. The air, force. The armed forces. Why do we have to resort to force? Because bad people don't respect your rights. They're going to victimize you. They're going to overcome your will with force and violence, which is the shortest distance between 2 points. You got something, I want it. You don't want to give it to me? Your will says, it's mine, I've earned it. My will says, give it to me. So I'm going to smack you in the head and take it from you. We call that a crime. We call these bad men, criminals, okay? Witchcraft is designed to overcome your will by magic. Now, you talk about something that is underneath the plumb line of heaven, and that is your will. You get to decide, you get to take action on your beliefs and on your convictions. Okay? God is not going to force you to do something against your will. He's not going to force a criminal to straighten up and fly right. That's why people have to use force. It's like, I'm having trouble with my spouse, so I'll fix that problem. I'll get a temporary restraining order. Now I've got a piece of paper that says he has to stay away from me. It's a piece of paper. If he was into obeying the courts and obeying the law and being civil, you wouldn't have to do this in the first place. What makes you think that that's going to protect you? It is not. All right. So the idea of, your personal protection, is your personal responsibility. That's biblical. Because in an emergency, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away. And people would say, yeah, but if you shoot a robber, or if you shoot somebody who's going to mug you, or you shoot somebody who's got a gun, then you're a murderer just like them. Shut up. No. That moral equivalency, no, that is completely invalid. Okay. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That was a new idea. Instead of the divine right of kings, God has put me in power, and now you have to do whatever I say. They're saying, no, the people are sovereign. The people will take these rights and they will do the right thing, except for a small percentage that don't respect these rights. And so we're going to have to institute a necessary evil. Now, let's talk about civilization a little bit. In a civilized society, you don't get to use force and violence just because you get mad. You don't get to use force and violence just to get what you want. Okay? You have to respect the other person's will. Okay? Because that's biblical. You don't get to use force and violence individually, except in the extreme case of self-defense. And there are very narrow, specific circumstances that allow for that. Okay? The courts don't want us to kill one another because it's very bad for business. You want to have a currency that works. You want to have a society where people specialize their labors and everybody advances as a result of this. You want to have free trade. Okay? You have to have justice. You have to have justice. Justice is an idea that deals with property. Justice says you are entitled to what you earn. Oh, sowing and reaping. You're entitled to what you earn, good or bad. Okay? You rob a bank, you've earned a jail sentence. There it is. Okay? You rape a child, in my humble opinion, you have earned the death penalty. Okay? Which the death penalty is practically, but the Bible says there are 3 specific instances where killing people is okay. Self-defense is one of them. Warfare is another one. And what's the third one? What? Oh, I'll think of it directly. There are 3 specific cases where, capital punishment. Capital punishment is okay. All right? Killing somebody in self-defense. Yeah, we'd rather not do that, but you got to do what you got to do. Because you will be able to look at that district attorney and say, if I hadn't shot this guy, he was going to kill me. And then he says, oh, you believe? You think he was going to kill you? With all due respect, sir, I was there. You weren't. He was going to kill me if I didn't defend myself. It comes down to that. Okay? So, where was I? Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just, the people are sovereign. If you have God-given rights, and to protect those rights, we make governments. Let's look at the idea of I remember where I was. The idea of justice. You are entitled to what you earn. You're not entitled to what you don't earn. But there's another class of things that you are entitled to, and those are the things that are given to you as a free gift. My rights have been given to me as a free gift. I accept them. They're mine. Don't try to take them away from me. They are unalienable. The inheritance that I received from my parents when they passed away, that was a free gift. I accept it. If I stick a gun in your face and say, give me your wallet, and you hand your wallet over, that's not a free gift. You're not entitled to that. Now, if you're entitled to what you earn or what you accept as a free gift, what if you suffer a loss that you didn't earn? The person that caused you to suffer the loss that you didn't earn owes you restitution, which you can demand. They are required by law to return you to your original condition because you suffered a loss, but you didn't earn it. See, all these ideas dovetail together perfectly. So rights are something that were given to us as a free gift. Let's look at rights. Do you have a right to life? Yes. Do you have a right to liberty? Yes. Freedom and responsibility? Yes. Do you have a right to property? Yes. Do you have a right to, this is where I'm going to get into trouble. Do you have a right to food? Now remember, a right is something that you can go to a person, look them right in the eye, and demand. Can you demand liberty? Yes. Can you demand justice? Yes. Can you demand food? No. Imagine going to a farmer and saying, you got cows, you got eggs, you got produce, feed me, I demand it. And he says, I don't think so. He says, but I need it. In modern thinking, okay, people are confounding need with merit. They are confounding need with rights. Yes, you need food, but you have to earn it. You can't demand it. You say, well, I'm not demanding it of one farmer. I'm demanding it of millions of farmers. No, that's just a difference of degree, not kind of activity and thought. Remember, you should be able to go to an individual and say, I have a right to this. I demand it. Do you have a right to affordable housing? No. Somebody has to build it. Somebody has to pay for it. Ayn Rand, I know, I can hear the machines turning off throughout the entire nation. Ayn Rand had her warts. Man, did she have her warts. But she said some things that were profound and true. She says, you can't have a right to something that somebody else has to work for and pay for. Because then they don't have a right to the product of their own labor, and that makes them your slave. And slavery is bad. Did I mention that? Slavery, bad. Okay. So, do you have a right to health care? Imagine going to a hospital and saying, my appendicitis is really flaring up. I demand that you operate on me and give me the best possible care. No, you have to earn that. There's lots of stuff that people away from center, AFC, have produced and gotten people to vote for and put into law that are simply not constitutional. Okay? Founding Fathers knew all about a welfare state, and they thought it was a terrible idea. Benjamin Franklin Did I mention he was a really fun guy to be around? They asked him, what do we do about poverty? He says, the best thing I can do for a person in poverty is make him uncomfortable in his poverty. Okay. Benjamin Franklin also said, just to give you an idea, he said, 3 men may easily keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. Which, what a guy. Okay. So, do you get the picture? America, as it was originally envisioned, said, you are free to be as industrious and to make as much money, to accumulate as much property, and by that, what we mean, you're pursuing happiness. As far as your talent and your work will carry you. And if you don't do anything, you will starve. Boy, that's really harsh. But I think we should allow people to suffer the full consequences of their negative decisions. How else are you going to learn? You know, government money should go into taking out full-page ads saying, here's a person that dropped out of school, used drugs, and got killed in gang warfare. They were stupid. Don't be like them. They suffered the full consequences of their negative behaviors, and they owned it. Now, that's very harsh, but that's what the founding fathers said. You know, some people are going to take advantage of this, and they're going to prosper. Everybody has the equal opportunity to prosper. Everybody's going to be treated equally under the law. Some are going to take advantage of that, and some people aren't. And the people that aren't, I'm sorry. So, if it's not government, founding fathers said it's not the government's part to have mercy on these people and give them assistance and provide for them and give them alms. And okay, the Bible says it is your responsibility and my responsibility as believing Christians to do this, and it is the church's responsibility as an organization of believers to do this. We're supposed to take care of the widows and the orphans. We don't just throw them out there in the cold. But look at the difference between getting a check in perpetuity, okay, with no accountability, as opposed to going to your pastor or deacon and saying, I can't make my payments this month, can you help me out? And the deacon says, yes, we have a benevolent fund and we will help you. What is your plan to keep this from happening again? Help us understand, how did you get into this circumstance where you couldn't meet your own needs? Okay, what are your plans to prevent this from happening in the future? Let's put a timeline on this. Okay, let's see some progress. Instead of just demanding that the congregation give you food, shelter, rent money? No, you don't have a right to that stuff. In a meritocracy, you earn it. There are people that are never going to be able to earn a living. They're so handicapped that they're always going to need help, and that's our responsibility to have mercy on them. But you see, then that becomes a free gift instead of the government taking tax money at the point of a gun. All right. So, in a civilization, you give up the right to use force and violence just to get what you want. And you give that privilege to the government. Okay? It's a good idea to make sure that the duties and responsibilities of the government are strictly limited and well understood by everybody, because they're the ones with the guns. Like I said, this is simple and it's beautiful All these ideas dovetail together. There aren't any contradictions. It's not perfect, but it's getting better. And it's up to us to cherish, to appreciate, to pray for our leadership like we have never prayed before, to recognize people that are away from center and trends that they are trying so hard to make normal. If you don't believe that we have drifted, just look at old reruns of The Andy Griffith Show or Leave It to Beaver and compare that to what passes for entertainment today. We have drifted since the 1960s. Daniel Lappin says, yes, it's started in the 60s. Okay, and it's been accelerating, moving away from the Plumb Bob of heaven. Okay, so I think that's about all the damage I can do tonight. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for our nation. Thank you for our godly leaders. Thank you for our godly founding fathers. Help us to appreciate and help us to practice our freedoms and to control ourselves in our behaviors and to influence people in our immediate vicinity and make changes gradually, little by little, radiating out. Thank you that we will stand up for liberty. We will stand up for freedom and responsibility. We will stand up for